I paid for my parents' flights, hotel, and even their outfits so they could attend my wedding. No one showed up. Maybe next time, my dad joked. We couldn't miss your sister's brother-in-law's poetry reading, my mom added. I didn't argue. I just did a bit of writing of my own, and by the next morning they were screaming. They say your wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of your life, a beautiful whirlwind of flowers, laughter, and love. That's what I pictured when I started planning mine. I booked the venue early. I found a little place that wasn't too expensive, but still pretty, a rooftop garden strung with fairy lights. I picked the menu carefully, making sure there were vegetarian options for my sister and champagne for my mom. I even moved the wedding closer to my hometown so it would be easier for my family to come. When they said they couldn't afford it, I believed them. Of course I did. I offered to help. When they still hesitated, I covered everything. Flights, hotel rooms, outfits. I paid for it all, even for my sister's husband, so she wouldn't have to travel alone. I told myself it was worth it, that family shows up when it matters. I didn't realize yet that showing up meant something very different to them than it did to me. The morning of the wedding, I got up early. My best friend, the one I grew up with, who used to trade Pokemon cards with me on the sidewalk, texted that he and his partner had landed safely. They'd booked their own tickets, paid their own hotel, no drama, just happy to be there. Meanwhile, I kept refreshing the airline app for my parents. Flight landed on time. Good, I thought. They're on their way. I stood in the dressing room, peeking out the window every few minutes like a nervous teenager waiting for a date. The officiant came by at 3:00, smiled gently. Just checking if we're ready. I said we might need a few more minutes. Maybe they hit traffic. Maybe their phones died. I called, straight to voicemail. Called again. No answer. The makeup artist finished my hair. The photographer clicked soft photos of my bouquet resting by the window. I smiled for the camera, checked my phone again. Still nothing. At 3:30, my best friend knocked gently and leaned inside. They're asking if you want to start. I stared at him, my throat tight. My dad was supposed to walk me down the aisle. He promised. Let's just give it 5 more minutes, I said, forcing a smile so wide it hurt. He nodded, waited with me, pretended he didn't see my hands shaking. I called again. Voicemail. Finally, at 3:37, my phone rang. Mom's number. I snatched it up so fast I almost dropped it. Oh, hi, sweetie, my mom chirped. Sorry, we couldn't make it. I blinked, not understanding. What? What happened? She laughed like I was being silly. Your sister's brother-in-law had a poetry reading. It was important to him, and she didn't want to go alone. We had to support her. You know how family is. I said nothing. She filled the silence brightly. You understand, right? In the background, my dad's voice, amused. Maybe next time. I stood there in my wedding dress, makeup done, bouquet in hand, trying to process that my parents had chosen a poetry reading over my wedding. Not even her poetry reading, her husband's brother's. And they hadn't even bothered to tell me. They just let me wait, let me panic, let me think they were lost or hurt or on their way, right up until the moment the music should have started. They let me pay for everything, let me move the entire wedding to make it easier for them, and still, not important enough. At 3:45, I tucked my phone away, took a breath. My best friend was still there, standing quietly, waiting to catch me if I fell. Would you, I started, voice cracking, would you walk me down? He smiled, no hesitation. Of course. And so I went, arm in arm with the boy who used to build tree forts with me in the backyard, who once sewed a Barbie dress with me when my sister laughed too hard to help. The ceremony went on. The vows were said, the rings exchanged. People clapped and cheered. Someone cried. I smiled through it all. Smiled until my cheeks ached. Smiled until it didn't even feel real anymore. At the reception, I laughed at jokes. I cut the cake. I danced with my new husband under the string lights I'd hung myself, and inside something hard and cold set deep in my chest. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the hotel room door clicked quietly shut behind us, I walked to the small desk by the window, sat down, opened my laptop. My husband crossed the room slowly, still in his suit jacket. Are you sure you want to do this? He asked. I nodded without looking at him, fingers already moving across the keyboard. Yes. He hesitated, then said softly, You know, once you send it, there's no undo button. I looked up then, really looked at him, and for the first time all day, I smiled. A real smile. Tomorrow everything changes. I hit send and I didn't look back. They say you're not supposed to think about the past on your wedding night. You're supposed to look forward. New beginnings, fresh starts, hope. I tried, but somehow, even as I curled into my husband's side under the heavy hotel blankets, I kept thinking about my sister and about all the years that led to this. My sister was 3 years older and 3 worlds away from me. She was the kind of girl people gravitated toward in high school, the one with the brand name clothes, the shiny hair, and the effortless laugh that made you feel like you should be grateful just to stand next to her. She wasn't kind, not to people who didn't fit, not to people like me. I used to watch it happen in the school hallways. A little smirk here, a whisper behind a hand there. Sometimes it was obvious. A loud, fake cough when someone with thrift store shoes walked by. Sometimes it was so casual, so practiced, you almost didn't notice. But I noticed. I noticed it when she laughed at me too. The parents called her selective. They said she had standards. You can't expect her to be friends with just anybody, my mom once said when I came home crying after being left out again. You need to toughen up, my dad added. Not everyone's cut out to be popular. Like it was my fault for not shining as bright as she did. I wasn't like her. I had a few close friends, and that was enough. I didn't need a spotlight. My best friend growing up lived next door. We spent more afternoons than I could count building Lego cities and making up stories about superheroes who baked cookies instead of saving the world. When we were 8, he proudly brought over a doll he'd won at a carnival, and we named it Captain Sprinkles. I thought it was the funniest thing in the world. My parents didn't. Boys like that usually turn out funny, my dad muttered once, loud enough for me to hear. No wonder he likes dolls more than football, my mom snickered over dinner. It wasn't angry, just dismissive, casual, like they were commenting on the weather. They didn't hide their disappointment, not when I picked my quiet, oddball friends, not when I preferred books to makeup, not when I stayed home sewing posters for the science fair while my sister went off to another glittery party. At some point, I think they just stopped expecting much from me altogether and started expecting everything from her. When we were teenagers, my sister became their trophy, homecoming queen, most likely to succeed. Every success she had was paraded like a badge of honor. Every cruelty she inflicted was brushed aside as part of growing up. When she was caught bullying another girl so badly she switched schools, my parents barely blinked. Teenage drama, they said. Girls are mean sometimes. It's normal. When I got an academic scholarship to a local college, they barely acknowledged it. No brunch, no announcement to the neighbors. Well, you always were the quiet one, my mom said, smiling vaguely, like that explained everything. I didn't realize back then that I was already learning something important. In our family, love was conditional. It was loud for her, silent for me. It showed up for performances, not persistence. And once I stopped performing for their attention, they stopped noticing I was there at all. When we got older, the gap only widened. My sister floated through life like it was a stage built just for her. Internships she didn't earn, jobs she didn't stay in. But no matter how many times she fell, the net was always there. My parents praising, funding, apologizing on her behalf. Meanwhile, I worked. I took night shifts. I packed orders for my tiny online store. I paid rent when they said I was lucky to live at home, conveniently forgetting I covered half the mortgage. And then one summer, I met him, my husband. He was a few years older, grounded, the first person in a long time who didn't look through me when my sister was in the room. He asked about my work, not hers. He listened when I spoke, didn't interrupt. He made me feel like maybe I was enough exactly as I was. I fell hard. When my sister met him for the first time, I saw it. The flicker of interest, quick as a camera flash. She turned up her smile, leaned a little too close when she laughed, twirled her hair the way she used to when she liked someone. Later, she tried to bump into him without me. Later still, she messaged him. Nothing overtly scandalous, just a casual, practiced invitation to hang out without the little sister tagging along. He declined politely, and that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Weeks later, she went to our parents in tears, painting herself as the wronged party. I saw him first, she said. It's not fair. Never mind that she was already seeing someone else. Never mind that he had never been hers to begin with. In our family, reality didn't matter as much as performance. She was upset, and that meant I was the villain. Maybe you should think about your sister's feelings for once, my mom said. Family is more important than some boy. My dad agreed. No one asked what I felt. No one cared. Her backup plan became her husband, Wealthy, steady, generous to a fault. Perfect. If you cared more about the right last name on wedding invitations than actual love. Behind closed doors, though, she never stopped talking. I settled. He's boring but rich. He thinks he won the lottery. Poor guy. I heard it all. The jokes, the casual cruelty. She had affairs. He bragged about it sometimes after a few drinks. And my parents? They laughed it off. Marriage is complicated, my mom said once, waving a hand. Boys are fragile, my dad added. Let her have her fun. But this time, I wasn't going to be the quiet one cleaning up her mess. This time, someone needed to know the truth. Someone who didn't deserve to be humiliated quietly behind closed doors like I had been for years. Maybe it wasn't revenge. Maybe it was solidarity. Maybe, for once, I was just choosing the side no one else had ever chosen. Mine. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath. Tomorrow would be different. And this time, I wasn't going to apologize for it. I woke up to my phone buzzing against the nightstand like it was trying to crawl away. Still groggy, I cracked one eye open and saw the missed calls piling up. 6 from home, 3 from Mom's cell, 2 from a number I didn't recognize but had a sinking feeling about. I didn't answer. Instead, I rolled over, pulling the blanket over my head, and let the soft hum of the hotel air conditioning fill my ears. New life rule. If it's urgent enough, they can text. Sure enough, the text followed. Call us now. What did you do? Fix this. We need to talk. Urgent. I set the phone face down on the nightstand without even reading the rest. Across the room, my husband stirred. Hair messy, shirtless, his wedding ring catching the morning light. Everything okay? He mumbled. Family's in crisis, I said, yawning. It must be Tuesday. He snorted and pulled the blanket over his head. By mid-morning, I got the first real clue about what was happening. A text from my cousin, who had the social awareness of a wet sponge. Yo, heard your sister's husband dipped. Crazy. Oh, family's freaking out. Dipped. That was one way to put it. Pieces filtered in slowly over the next few days, like a messy jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. After the poetry reading, my sister's husband had apparently seen the message I sent, or rather the collection of screenshots and recordings and proof. Proof that his wife, the one he had supported through jobs she quit, leases she broke, dreams she never followed through on, had never respected him, had laughed at him, had cheated on him. From what I heard, there hadn't been a screaming match right away. Just silence. A long, dangerous kind of silence. The kind that meant the real damage wasn't even visible yet. Within a few days, the fallout started to show. My sister's husband moved out quietly, without a dramatic scene, and filed the divorce paperwork by the end of the week. And with him went the invisible safety net my parents had never admitted they needed. He stopped payments to my parents' business, stopped covering shortfalls in their mortgage when unexpected expenses came up, stopped making polite excuses for why their bills were never fully paid on time. It was like someone turned off a tap they didn't even realize they had been drinking from. I made my own quiet moves, canceled the automatic payments I had set up temporarily 2 years ago, the ones covering part of their utilities, their emergency dental work, the cosign I had made for their car lease, unlinked my accounts, removed my name from the shared emergency fund, redirected my own savings somewhere safer, somewhere I wouldn't feel guilty using. I didn't announce it, no big confrontations, just a quiet vanishing act. The thing about financial ruin is that it doesn't crash all at once. It leaks first. The credit card minimums get missed, then the business invoices get paid late, then suppliers start calling instead of sending polite reminder emails. Then the bank regrets to inform you that your application for a second line of credit has been declined. It was a slow, painful process, exactly the way they had let their treatment of me fester over the years. Small neglects, small insults, small betrayals, until the whole foundation rotted through. I spent a lot of evenings just sitting with it. The silence, the absence, the strange ache of cutting yourself free from something you spent your whole life chasing. I'd always thought that if I ever really let go of my parents, it would feel like falling off a cliff. It didn't. It felt like unclipping a weight from my ankle. I wasn't falling, I was floating. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. There were moments, quiet ones, when the grief hit harder than I expected. Like when I started drafting thank you notes to guests and instinctively thought to send one to my parents before remembering they hadn't been there. Or when I walked through a store and saw a little mother of the bride frame, and my hand reached out automatically, stupidly, like it still believed the right people had cared. Or when a stranger smiled at my husband and me and said, "You must have such supportive families," and I had to laugh because the only thing my family supported was their own egos. There's a certain kind of humor that settles in your bones when you survive people like that. Not the laugh out loud kind. The dry, tired, of course they did kind. The kind you sip like bad coffee in a cheap diner at 2 o'clock a.m., just glad to be somewhere else. There were other changes too, quiet ones. About 2 weeks after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. I stared at the test in the cramped hotel bathroom, back pressed against the wall, heartbeat rattling somewhere up near my ears. It wasn't planned, not exactly unplanned either, just earlier than we thought. I sat there for a long time, palms pressed flat against the cold tile, while the world tilted slightly around me. When I told my husband, he just smiled, pulled me in, said, "We're ready, you're ready." And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. I didn't tell my parents, not even when the texts and emails started trickling in. Some news doesn't belong to people who wouldn't be happy for you. Some milestones are too precious to offer up to people who only see them as leverage. Meanwhile, their situation worsened. I didn't chase updates, but I wasn't deaf either. Cousins gossiped, old neighbors sent curious texts. The family group chat, long since muted, buzzed with secondhand worry. Business revenue dropped. A few vendors pulled out of deals. Bills piled up. They started missing small payments, then bigger ones. It wasn't dramatic yet. No foreclosure notices, no court dates, but the pressure was building, like a hairline crack spidering through glass. They didn't show up at my door. Not yet. That would come later, when things got bad enough that pride wasn't stronger than panic. So I wondered sometimes if they were surprised. Surprised that the quiet one didn't fold. That the invisible daughter was the one they had relied on the most, without ever realizing it. I thought about that on the nights when I sat at the kitchen table, paperwork for the new house spread out in front of me, my husband thumbing through listings, our feet tangled together under the chair. Some nights, my childhood best friend would call. We talked about the old neighborhood, laughed about the time we accidentally flooded his garage trying to build a water slide, made half-serious plans to travel once the baby was born. He didn't ask about my parents. He didn't need to. That was the thing about real family. They knew when silence meant survival. By the end of the 3rd month after the wedding, it was clear things were slipping out of my parents' control. Their business listed a temporary closure for renovations that somehow never ended. Their house quietly went up for preliminary offers, masked as downsizing for retirement. People started noticing. The invites stopped. The pity looks started. No screaming matches, no dramatic confrontations, just a slow, steady unraveling, the same way they had unraveled my faith in them over a lifetime. Me, I floated further away every day, not falling, flying. The day they showed up, it was raining. Not a sweet, romantic drizzle, the kind of rain that slaps against windows sideways and makes you wonder if you should build an ark, just in case. Fitting, really. I had just finished folding tiny onesies, mint green, soft gray, little yellow stars, when the doorbell rang. Not once. 5 times, fast, like someone was holding the button down with their whole palm. My husband froze at the sound. We traded a look across the kitchen. We already knew. I peeked through the peephole. There they were, suitcases stacked at their feet, soggy jackets, tight, furious smiles. My parents and my sister, 3 faces I hadn't seen in months, now shoved up against the doorway like a threat. I didn't open it right away, just stood there, forehead pressed against the cool wood, breathing deeply. My husband came up behind me and put a steadying hand on my back. "We can call now," he said quietly. "Not yet," I whispered. "Some things you have to see for yourself before you set them on fire." When I finally opened the door, they pushed past me without so much as a hello. Rainwater dripped onto the hardwood floor. My sister dropped her duffel bag right in the middle of the living room. My dad planted himself by the TV like he owned it. My mom gave a tight little nod, like she was expecting tea service. "We're not leaving," my dad said, voice hard. "Not until you fix this," my mom added. I shut the door slowly behind them, heart beating strangely calm. They launched into it immediately, a full attack. They wanted me to call my sister's husband, to explain that I had lied, to tell him it was all jealousy, all a misunderstanding, all a cruel prank born out of spite. "You ruined our lives," my mom hissed. "You embarrassed this family," my dad added. "You're going to fix this if it's the last thing you do," my sister snapped. Their voices rose over each other, a tangle of anger, fear, and desperation. I stood there letting it wash over me. I wasn't their daughter right then. I was a task, a transaction, a broken vending machine they were kicking, hoping the candy would still fall out. At some point, my dad made it official. If you won't help, we're staying here until you do. He crossed his arms, dared me to argue. My mom sat heavily on the couch, started talking about splitting up rooms. My sister wandered toward the guest bedroom, dragging her suitcase behind her like this was already decided. I laughed, quiet. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. Because if they thought I was still the girl who would let them walk in and take over, they hadn't been paying attention. You're trespassing, I said simply. They blinked at me, like I had spoken another language. You invited us, my mom said, voice too high. I didn't even tell you where I lived, I said calmly. My husband was already dialing behind me. I heard him speaking to someone in that polite, efficient voice he used for serious things. My dad stepped forward, looming. You don't call the police on family. Funny, I said, smiling thinly. I thought family didn't abandon you on your wedding day. Silence, heavy and ugly. For the first time, I saw a flicker of real fear across my mom's face. It didn't take long. 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. 2 officers, professional, polite. I didn't have to say much. Just pointed, handed over my ID, showed the lease agreement with my name and my husband's name only. The officers asked my parents and sister to leave, gave them a chance to pack up calmly. My sister screamed, of course, said I was heartless, said I was destroying what little family I had left. My mom cried. My dad muttered threats under his breath. But eventually, under the calm gaze of 2 very patient police officers, they left, dragging their soaking bags back into the rain. When the door shut behind them, I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. My husband sat beside me, silent, warm. The baby kicked lightly, like a reminder. This is family now, not them. Later, we moved again. Found a house farther away, closer to the kind of life we actually wanted. We didn't send out an address change. Only a few people knew where we were. My best friend and his partner visited sometimes, bringing silly gifts and stories about travel and late-night diners in cities we hadn't been to yet. The life I had imagined having with my parents, easy, supportive, unconditional, I built it elsewhere. I built it better. Through distant cousins and mutual acquaintances, I heard the aftermath. The house my parents had loved bragging about, sold at a loss. The business, gone. The sister who was always too good for consequences now crashing on couches, blaming everyone but herself. I didn't reach out. Not when the divorce was finalized. Not when the bankruptcy was filed. Not when the social media posts dried up like spilled wine on a dusty floor. I used to think that cutting them off would feel like tearing something out of myself, like losing a limb, but it didn't. It felt like standing up for the first time after realizing you were never broken. You were just sitting in the wrong place all along. I still have the tiny, mint green onesie folded away in a drawer. The first one I bought, the one I was afraid to tell anyone about, the one I finally realized I didn't need their blessing for. My baby will never grow up thinking love is something you have to earn by being useful. She'll never feel small in her own home. She'll know what family actually means. And the best part? They'll never even know her name. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. If sending that message, cutting them off, calling the police, if all of it was really necessary. But then I think about the girl I used to be, the one who kept forgiving, the one who kept hoping. And I realize I didn't go too far. They just never thought I'd go anywhere at all. Still, I'd love to know what you think. Did I do the right thing? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to hit subscribe.